our questions. You are working on receptive labels with your client. While sitting at the table, you say, touch bird. After the client responds, you deliver feedback and then say, touch bird. You repeat this 3 more times. This is an example of what? Okay, so we're doing some sort of rote training here, right? This type of training should immediately start to signal DTT to you, right? DTT, remember, we're presenting an SD, we're getting a response, delivering a consequence, pausing, and then doing it all over again, okay? So we're thinking DTT, we just want to figure out what type of discrete trials we are doing. Now, in this scenario, you're having your client touch bird, and then touch bird again, and then touch bird again, and again, and again. 5 times in a row, you present the same SD, and you want the same response. So what is this an example of? Is this incidental teaching? Of course not, right? Incidental teaching is naturalistic teaching. We're clearly doing some sort of DTT, maybe even at a table, okay? But we're not naturally teaching touch bird, okay? Are we doing distractor trials? Distractor trials are essentially maintenance trials. So this is when you mix in already mastered trials, okay, to the trials you're teaching. Not what we're doing here, right? We're trying to teach touch bird and we're doing it over and over again. Is it a mass trial DTT? Yes, think about the name, mass trial, right? You're running the same trial over and over again, okay, and getting the same response and trying to deliver the same feedback, the same reinforcement. Mass trial DTT is great for teaching new skills because you can do the same skill over and over and reinforce over and over. What about mixed trial? Mixed trial is the opposite, right? That would be interspersing different SDs into your DTT. So you might say touch bird, touch cat, touch frog. That would be mixed trial. But in this case, we're doing the same trial, the same SD over and over. Therefore, we are doing mass trial DTT. Tom's session note read, arrived at client's house. Client was eating breakfast. After breakfast, we transitioned to client's room and started DTT. During DTT, client became frustrated and attempted to throw materials on the ground, put behavior on extinction, and continued. What is incorrect about this session note? Okay, actually a decent session note, right? We get a pretty clear picture of what's happening here. But there's one thing that Tom did wrong. What did Tom do wrong? Okay, think about what's jumping out at you about this session note. Okay, there's one word in particular that should really be an alarm to you. Okay, what is that? A, it does not matter what the client was doing when Tom arrived. Well, that's not true, right? It's irrelevant. That's what we want to know. Like with the session notes, we need to know what happened during session. Okay, and the more details you can give, the better. So absolutely, it's fine to tell us what happened or what the client was doing when he arrived. What about B? The client should be ready to start working as soon as Tom arrives. Not necessarily, okay? Many sessions are more laid back, right? We want to keep it very natural. So if the client is eating breakfast, there's plenty you can do with the client while they're eating breakfast. Okay, so totally acceptable how the client started the session. What about Tom needs to describe the behavior in more detail? Maybe, but we still get a pretty good idea, right? Client threw materials on the ground. You can picture in your mind what this looks like, okay? Especially if you've been to the house and you know the client, right? You know what this probably seems like. So you can always add more detail, right? But it's not incorrect necessarily. So that leaves us with D. Tom used subjective language when describing the client. Yes, and what word here is subjective? Think about what we're looking at. We want observable, we want measurable. What can't we observe and what we can't measure? We can't observe and measure frustrated, okay? And you might say, well, I can tell when my client's frustrated. Maybe, but if someone who didn't know the client was observing the client, would they always be able to reliably observe frustration? Not necessarily, right? Everybody presents frustration differently, okay? Frustration is internal, okay? It's something we can't reliably and accurately measure and observe, okay? When you're doing session notes, you need to be objective and you need to leave opinions out. This is Tom's opinion that the client was frustrated. Okay, don't be subjective. So that's the issue with the session note. That word frustration is subjective. Session notes need to be objective. Only say what happened. Don't give your opinion, okay, or your thought, right? Unless you're using behavioral terms like the function, okay? If you're describing the behavior functionally, like client attempted to escape, right? That's a function and that's okay. Frustration is subjective. We don't use subjective language in session notes. That's the issue with this one. Which of the following would not qualify as an unconditioned punisher? Okay, what do we know about punishers? Punishers reduce behavior. What do we know about unconditioned? Unconditioned means it didn't require any learning, right? There's no pairing. This is something that just naturally, okay, genetically, biologically, however you want to say it, functions as a punisher. Okay, there's no pairing involved, there's no learning, there's no training, there's no teaching. Okay, so which of the following would not qualify? Okay, read the question carefully, be careful about the nots, right? So we're looking for the one that isn't an unconditioned punisher. What about A, biting into food that is too hot? Well, heat, right, is obviously an unconditioned punisher. Okay, if you're a little baby and you get too hot, that's going to be punishing. Okay, so if you bite into some food that is too hot, that is an unconditioned punisher, right? There's no pairing involved. What about walking outside in freezing cold weather? Again, just like heat, freezing cold is unconditioned. Okay, we don't need it. We don't need to learn how uncomfortable freezing cold weather can be, right? And that can punish and reduce our behavior of walking outside when it's freezing cold. What about C, reprimanding a student for talking in class? So a reprimand is a socially delivered punisher, okay? But do we need some sort of learning or pairing to understand that a reprimand is a punisher? Sure, right? The person delivering the reprimand has to pair themselves with something to establish themselves, right? As an SD, the reprimand has to be adequate, okay? Many times reprimands are not punishment, right? I mean, if you've ever had a teacher or somebody maybe you didn't respect, okay? If they reprimand you, it doesn't really matter, okay? So a reprimand, in order to be a punisher, would have to be paired and learned, okay? That qualifies it as a conditioned punisher, okay? And not an unconditioned punisher. C is our answer. Always read all of your answer choices. D, receiving a shock from an electrical outlet. Obviously, pain, electric shock, right, is unconditioned. We are from birth, know that pain signals a punishment, okay, and can reduce the behavior. So our answer here is C, and that is a conditioned punisher because it required pairing and learning to become a punisher. After waiting in line at Starbucks, Dan walks up to the counter and says, "I'd like a tall black coffee." What type of verbal operant is this? Okay, remember our verbal operants or our verbal behaviors, okay? As an RBT, you only need to really know a few: mans, tax, coex, and your verbals. Those four are the big ones. So we've got those four here. What is Dan doing, okay? First thing, is Dan responding to a verbal SD? Did anybody ask Dan anything? No, Dan just walked up to the counter and said, "I want this." So if Dan is making a request, what verbal operant is a request? Is that an interverbal? No, an interverbal is more conversational, right? An interverbal is the learner responding to another person in a conversational manner. Dan simply walked up and said, "I'd like a tall black coffee." He made a request. Is that a mand? Yes, a mand is a request. When you do mand training, you're teaching someone how to communicate their wants and needs, to request their wants and needs, okay? You're going to do a lot of mand training as an RBT. So get used to understanding reinforcing a request and what mands are, okay? Tax are simply labels. You're labeling things. And a coex is simply repeating or parroting back what you heard, okay? So this situation is a mand, okay? Quick tip, If you want to get really good at ABA and good at the RBT exam, apply ABA to your real life scenarios, and you're going to get extremely good. Our student at the beginning of this presentation who left the feedback, she applied ABA to all of her day-to-day lives. It makes you so much better at it. You're going to get really good if you do that consistently. But in this case, the type of verbal operant is a man. Brenda orders food from a food delivery app 3 to 4 times a week. An estimated delivery time is provided when she places her order. Last night, the estimated delivery time was 45 to 55 minutes. What type of reinforcement schedule does this represent? Okay, so we probably all do this, right? Uber Eats or Postmates or whatever you use, DoorDash, okay? You're gonna, for a food delivery app, you place your order and you get an estimated time, okay? Usually it's pretty long, 45, 55, an hour, right? Whatever it is. And you have to wait, okay? You have to wait that long to get your food, your reinforcement, okay? So what type of reinforcement schedule does that represent? Well, think about how we break down our reinforcement schedules, okay? We obviously have our basic ones, fixed ratios, variable ratios, fixed intervals, variable intervals. So let's ask ourselves first, is this fixed or is this variable? Remember, fixed means it's consistent. It's a one number, right? Doesn't change. Variable is an average. The number is changing. Is our schedule changing? Well, 45 to 55 minutes could be 45, 46, 47, 48, right? All the way up to 55. That number could change. Therefore, it's going to be a variable, right? We know it's a variable schedule. What about ratio versus interval? Are we getting reinforcement based on the number of responses? Does it matter what we do in that time frame? Okay. Will we produce reinforcement? No, we have to wait that time, okay? And not until that time has elapsed will we have a chance to get reinforcement, okay? Doesn't matter what you do, how you respond. If that delivery time is 45 to 55 minutes and that's how long it takes, we just have to wait, okay? So we're on an interval schedule here. So we're on a variable, right? 45 to 55 interval minutes schedule. So the reinforcement schedule is VI, variable interval. Which of the following strategies would be most effective at establishing behavioral momentum with the client? Okay, so behavioral momentum is very important, right? Once we get things rolling, we can produce a lot of responses, steady, consistent responses, okay? Hopefully more accurate responses. But what's a good way to get to that point, okay? What about A, a high probability request sequence? Well, yeah, absolutely, right? That's the whole purpose of the high P, low P request sequence, right? So we've got this high probability request sequence is referred to as the high P, low P sequence, high P request sequence, high P sequence. High probability request sequence is what? That's when we ask our client to do or make responses that are known and that are easy. And then once they've done 2 or 3, we follow with what we actually want to see, which is the harder response. Okay, so we build momentum with the easy responses, and then we introduce the difficult response, okay, to produce that response. Okay, so to establish behavior momentum, high probability request sequences are fantastic. So A looks really good. Let's read the rest. I'll always read all the answer choices. B, positive punishment. Well, punishment, you're trying to do the opposite, right? We want no behavior momentum. We want the behavior to decrease. C, differential reinforcement of other behaviors. No, again, we're going to reinforce for a behavior not happening, right? And then a variable ratio schedule does not increase behavior momentum, okay? Remember, it's that slot machine effect, right? Variable ratio doesn't strengthen behavior, okay? It maintains. So the best answer here for establishing behavior momentum is A, a high probability request sequence, high P, low P, high P. A new pizza restaurant opened on your street. You enjoyed the pizza, but felt like it took forever for your meal to arrive at the table. You left a Yelp review complimenting the pizza, but criticizing the wait time. The manager promised to improve. What does the manager need to decrease in terms of wait time? We've probably all been here, right? The restaurant might have been delicious, but It took forever to get your food. There's nothing worse than waiting for a meal, right? It's just the worst, okay? So you left a Yelp review saying, I like your pizza, but the wait time I didn't like. Manager said, okay, we're going to do better. What does the manager need to decrease in terms of wait time? What about duration? Okay, well, what's duration? Duration is total time, okay? If we decrease the duration of your wait time from 50 minutes to 30 minutes, that's pretty darn good, right? So A is pretty good. If the manager is able to reduce your duration that you wait, okay, you're going to be happier as long as the pizza is still good, okay? So A is good. Always read the rest of your answer choices, okay? If you start answering a lot of A's, right, that's fine, but you want to read every answer choice because you want the best answer. What about B, enter response time, IRT? Well, are we decreasing the time in between waiting? No, I need the current wait time to decrease, okay? When you're in my restaurant, I need your wait time to go down. IRT would be time in between wait times, which you could view as time in between visiting the restaurants. That'd be great, obviously, but not what we're trying to decrease in this scenario. What about frequency? Are we counting anything? No, we're dealing with time here. We're not counting anything, okay? We're looking at total duration. Since we're not using frequency, rate obviously does not play a factor because rate is just a product of frequency over time. So C and D are out. That leaves us again with A, duration. Best answer, we want to reduce the duration of our wait time. If you wanted to train and promote generalization, which of the following strategies would be most effective? Okay, so what is generalization? Generalization is performing the skill outside of the learned environment, okay? So when we teach skills, we typically teach them in controlled settings, okay? We're controlling the reinforcement, we're controlling the feedback, we're controlling the stimuli. But if we want to generalize, okay, how do we go about doing that? A, you should use multiple variations of stimuli when teaching. What does that mean? That means if I'm teaching you to identify birds, I'm going to not just use a cardinal. I'm going to use a bluebird or blue jay, a cardinal, a pigeon, right? I'm going to use a bunch of different stimuli so you start to recognize that birds come in many different shapes and sizes, okay? This would be a great way to promote generalization. All right, so A is good. We need to read the rest of the answer choices. Here's a good example why. B, you should teach across many different environments. That's the whole point, right? When we want to generalize, we need to teach across all environments, okay? If I teach in home, I need to teach outside the home, the school, and the clinic. That's the only way we can start to improve, okay, our ability to do these things outside of the learning environment. So B also promotes generalization. What about C? You should encourage other RBTs to ask the client to perform the skill. Absolutely. Generalizing across people, extremely important, right? You can't just have one RBT that the client responds to. They need to respond to multiple, okay? And that's functional, that's real life. So A is good, B is good, C is good. That leaves us with D, all the above. Again, a great example of why even if you find the answer early, you need to read all your answer choices because you just never know if there's a better answer or if it's an all the above question. Your BCBA wants to identify a client's current skill level. She asks you to take data on the skill, but to not intervene or teach the client yet. What type of data are you taking? All right, pretty easy question, very easy question actually. If you know your definitions, this is a 15-second question. One of our questions we answer immediately and move on. If you're taking data before intervention, before teaching, what type of data are you taking? Are you taking duration data? Maybe, but there's not enough information in the question to let us pick duration. We don't know. We don't know what type specifically, what type of measurement procedure, right? But it's a very specific type of data. What about partial interval? Again, not sure. There's not enough information, okay? What about baseline? Absolutely. Baseline data is data taken before the intervention starts, okay? So before you intervene or teach, you take your baseline data, to get an idea of where the client is before you teach them. That way we can measure progress once we start teaching. So our answer here is C, right? What about D, maintenance? No, maintenance comes after you're teaching. This is all before we teach. So if we want data on the skill before we teach it, we want baseline data. While sitting in class, you constantly twirl your pencil while listening to a lecture. When you get home, you start watching Netflix by yourself, continue twirling your pencil. Based on this information, what would you hypothesize the function of the behavior might be? Okay, so what are we doing here? We're twirling our pencil, right? We're in a lecture, we're bored, or we're just mindlessly twirling this pencil. You get home, now you're by yourself, okay? And you start twirling your pencil again, okay? So what are you doing this for? What is the reason this behavior is occurring? So the dead giveaway here is by yourself, okay? When behavior occurs across multiple scenarios and then occurs when a person is alone, it's typically a good indicator that this behavior is automatic or sensory. Okay, remember, automatic sensory is the same function, right? Automatic, of course, means it's not socially mediated. You don't need another person to deliver reinforcement. In this case, twirling your pencil happens across multiple settings and when you're alone. Okay, so you're delivering reinforcement to yourself, okay, for some sensory purpose, some automatic purpose. What about attention? There's no indicator that you're doing this for attention. Okay, nobody's giving you feedback, nobody's commenting on it. You're doing it alone. Escape, again, you're not getting out of doing anything. Okay, you're watching Netflix, you're not trying to escape Netflix. Okay, and then tangible, are you trying to gain anything? It's not clear. Okay, it doesn't seem like you get anything by doing this. Therefore, since you're doing it alone and you're doing it across multiple settings and you're not gaining attention, you're not escaping, or you're not gaining something, this is most likely automatic sensory behavior. Okay, I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe if you did. Check out all our study materials, including that combo pack. Questions, comments, please let me know. Please email me. I'm happy to help. Other than that, keep working hard and keep studying hard. I'll see you soon.